Entrepreneur Podcast today, everybody. We've got Stewart Beale with us. Stewart, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
So Stuart's kindly come on today to talk about his journey from sales all the way up to consultant, co-founding a beer brand. There's so much going on. Stewart, do you want to tell us where you started and how you got where you are?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's a long and winding journey, I guess. But I spent the first half of my career in sales roles, working for drinks companies, and when I say drinks, I mean beer. And it's the sort of industry that once you're in it, it's hard to leave. It's really good fun. There's loads of great people in it, and I just found more and more interesting jobs, as I went up the career ladder. So that's where I started. I've worked in consumer goods and it is mainly drinks for most of my career. And since leaving sales roles, I've done pretty much every part of what sits under sales and marketing, from commercial strategy, pricing, brand launches, through to field sales, CRM and sales operations. So it's given me a really nice sort of view of every component part of sales and marketing up to pretty senior level. And I thought, there would be a great opportunity for me. I've always wanted to do my own thing. And when I eventually became brave enough, I thought I would try and use all that great experience and some great companies to take it out to a broader audience and see if that was useful for people, which so far it has been. So that's sort of the very, very short version.
So after seeing where you started off, and you say it was in sales, I was asking you just before this, but I'll ask you again. How do you go about doing sales in a nice way, where you're not coming across as pestering and you're not being false? Is there a way to do this? Because this is what I always get.
Yeah, well, I think there's a way not to do it, which is to sort of push your own agenda and be annoying, frankly. I think, I wouldn't profess to be the best salesperson in the world when I was in sales, let alone sort of now on the consultancy side. But I think people respond when you're respectful, when you genuinely listen. You try and find out, what their issues and challenges are, and you just start a dialogue. You've obviously, when you're running your own business, you need to, think of a pipeline and when you're going to turn a nice conversation into something meaningful from a business point of view. But I don't think you can necessarily force that. Some clients have, within a matter of 2 or 3 conversations, you're suddenly in there, and you're fairly quickly, starting a project. Others, and there's one particular moment which I think is a great opportunity, but I've been talking to them for nearly 6 months now, and it's great signs, but they're just, that we'll do something together, but it's just not the right time. So you just have to be patient. But I think if I think all the way back to my sales, roles when I was straight out of university, I think it was listen to your customer, understand what's going on in their world, and then try and respond to that, in a human way that's sympathetic to whatever challenges they're facing, and clearly try and find some solutions that will help them solve those problems. So I think it's keeping it very personal and on a human level, but with enough structure behind you so you can, stay in touch and not let things drift and all that good stuff. I think is, where I've found things to work for me. But it is tough. I'm forever looking for the magic bullet on how to, push clients through a pipeline quickly, and I'm yet to find it. I think there's a load of art as well as science to selling. So I don't know how useful it is for people listening, but yeah, certainly being a human being is goes a long way, I've found anyway.
So going from that to consulting, you've obviously got a huge amount of experience in different areas that would help you when you went into consulting. But what was the kind of catalyst that put you into consulting, and what was your mindset around that move?
Well, there was a few things really. If I sort of explain a bit about what I do in the consulting area, it's really sort of working with consumer goods companies, and the thing that I sort of learned and observed in my career in big companies like Coca-Cola, Carlsberg, Brakes Food Service, and other places was that having done a lot of different roles across sales and marketing, it's quite often the case that in those roles at whatever level you're at, you're really busy. And you haven't necessarily got the time to look at what your colleagues are doing in other teams. It's not that you want to shut people out, but it's just pretty relentless out there. And trying to be successful in today's world is really tough anyway. So everyone's got their hands full spinning plates. And at the same time, businesses are trying to find ways to grow. And there's this sort of challenge there that says, how do I keep everything going today? All my operational priorities, there's a customer that needs dealing with. there's an operational challenge. How do I do all that properly and not let things fall over and hit my numbers, and at the same time think about the future? And what I've found myself doing in lots of those roles was finding it almost impossible to think about the future. So from a consulting point of view, what I sort of started to piece together over the years in these different jobs was, I think there are sort of 4 stages that get you to success, and you need all 4. The first one is being really clear about where it is you want to be. So, what is your destination, setting a clear goal. And from that, you can then start to understand and develop what your growth strategy looks like. So where do you want to play in the market? So that's the sort of first area, which looks at all the external factors. And I've done roles that sort of just do that all day long. The next bit is then saying, so once you've decided where you want to play, you clearly have to work out how you're going to win. So this is your product, your service offer, your pricing, your promotions, how are you going to deal with customers, the trade terms that you might want to put in place, what margins are going to be acceptable, how are you going to price all your different packages from, entry level up to premium, and getting that all really clear. And then how are you going to, win in different channels with different customers. So they're sort of the 2 bits that are very externally facing. And then there's the 2 other critical pieces, which are more internally focused, which is around having the right commercial operating model. So that's about how I've organized my sales team, my category team, my insights team, everybody that supports the sell, if you like. And it's not just, superstar salespeople that win good business. It's often a very team effort from a number of functions. So making sure that that's organized, it's the right size, it's got the right skills and capability, and everyone's joined up is really important. Otherwise, you'll quickly diverge and plans will start to, go to nothing. And then the final bit, which is really boring but really interesting in terms of the difference it can make, is commercial effectiveness. And under that heading, I would talk about, what is your meetings, your governance routines, where do you make decisions, how do you escalate stuff when you need to, how do you make sure that you can make as many decisions as close to the customer as possible, and then how do you set up some of the structures, so reporting suites, incentive schemes, how you make those cross-functional, so it's not just, sales earning an absolute fortune and people in finance thinking, well, we just get treated like, numbers rather than people. So those 4 areas are basically what I learned in 25 years. And it made me think, quite often when we had consultancy, when I was working in those jobs, they would look at a part of that rather than all of it. And I thought, there's possibly a gap in the market here. When I talked to people about that, the response was, yeah, you're right. Looking at it from an end-to-end point of view is not something we often do. And if we did that and got things to work better, it would allow us to get a better balance of how we manage the business today, but also think about where we're going tomorrow. So the idea sort of began to take shape, and having talked to a few people, I thought, well, at some point I will want to do something about this, and then it's a question of timing. I had an itch that I wanted to scratch about working, for myself for years, but there's a time of life, kids, no, it's not the right time. I need, safety of a salary. There's then career, and you think, well, there's a promotion coming up, so it's trying to work out when the right time is to go out and do it on your own. And of course, you need some financial safety net behind it. So I decided to take the plunge after having had a couple of years of breaks by when we had a reorganisation, and from that I sort of had the courage to sort of finally go out there and give it a go. So that's a long process that got me to what I think it is that I need to do, and then a bit of serendipity and a bit of planning to sort of decide the point at which to make the leap.
So you mentioned all these functions and all these people and all this stuff going on, and how there's not an end-to-end kind of process. But when you become a consultant or an entrepreneur, you have to condense all that down into your one brain and put that into a product. How does that work?
Well, I try and keep things simple. I do like to talk, so people do tell me often to get to the point more quickly, so see what your audience thinks. But I think it's trying to keep it simple. So that 4 steps, what's your growth strategy, where to play, how am I going to win, what's my commercial model, and then how do I make sure the business is effectiveness. You can quite quickly distill an awful lot of content down into something that is quite common sense. People kind of go, oh, I get that. And then the whole thing becomes more manageable. I would find it almost impossible to conceive of a client that would want to do absolutely everything I've described in one project. It's highly unlikely unless it's a major transformation. But to be honest, there are much bigger consultancies out there than me that would probably be higher on the shortlist, if you like, to do that scale of work. So I think it is just, back to what I said earlier about selling. It's like that's what I can do. I've got a whole network of people that I can work with that have got deep expertise in particular areas. But what is it of those 4 areas that you're finding particularly challenging, and where should we start? So it's trying to sort of quickly go from the stump speech, if you like, about the broad coverage down into, well, of those things, what's of interest, what's an opportunity for you, what's keeping you awake at night, and then we can come up with something that's much more targeted, which may just be one simple thing around how do I get sense around my pricing strategy with the brands and the packs that I've got in market, so that there's some sense to the way I'm selling my beer brand or drinks brand or whatever it might be. And that's a really important but quite narrow focus, and you just get there through conversation, really.
So would you like to, since you mentioned beer, talk to us about beer?
Yeah, so that's something else that I get up to. As I mentioned, I've worked in the beer industry for drinks and beer industry for years, and seen all these wonderful things happening in loads of parts of the beer sector and drinks generally. There's an explosion of innovation and no and low alcohol and hard seltzers and various other things. But craft beer is one thing that I've watched with interest and been involved with a number of craft beer brands over the years. So funnily enough, this came through a consulting sort of opportunity that I got introduced to somebody, a guy called Greg Bateman, who used to play for Leicester Tigers. He now plays for Newport Gwent Dragons in the Pro 14, and he'd been brewing beer as a hobby. And we got chatting because he was like, "Oh, how do I turn this from a hobby into a business? Because I'm not going to play rugby for another decade." And the more we got talking, the more it just we sort of hit it off, and it sort of makes sense to, rather than me just provide some pearls of wisdom as it is, to get more stuck in. So and that's what I like about this. Having taken the bold move, if you like, or stupid move, depending on your perspective, to sort of leave corporate life. Opportunities like this suddenly are. You can realise them. You can have more flexibility and variety, and when something looks good and feels good, you can take a bit of a risk, if you like, or place a bet and dive in and see where it takes you. So yeah, the company's called People's Captain, and it's craft beer. We've just launched on direct to consumer last year, right in the middle of a pandemic, which seemed to be the right channel to launch in. But we've got interesting plans for growth, looking to raise funds shortly, and we've had a really great response actually so far. And it's I think from a consulting point of view, it's everything I've described. We're doing all of it from standing start into 6 months to have a fully functioning business end to end. From web design to product development, packaging, labeling, logistics, e-commerce, social media campaigns, events. Everything's had to be put in place from a standing start, and it's been a real test for me to be able to do what I say I'm going to do, which is think about where we're going to grow, but how we're going to keep all those operational things going. So it's been a fantastic learning. I've really enjoyed it. It's been super stressful at times, but that's everyone running their own business would say that. And yeah, it's been great fun. And running through the business is a purpose that's really important to us, is around mental health. Greg's been one of the people that are brave enough to have faced up to mental health struggles and been brave enough to talk about it. And in the sporting world, there's not many people that have done that. So he's sort of pretty well known for talking around mental health. So at the heart of People's Captain is the foundation. So a contribution from our sales and equally fundraising generally will help to raise funds for positive action to support mental health in the UK. So yeah, that's sort of really front and center about what the company's about. We just so happen to make great beer, I would say that, but it's got some great reviews, and then we'll see where it goes. We've got ambitions to grow into other drinks categories. I mentioned hard seltzers, spirits is of interest to us. CBD beers we're looking at as well. So it gives me lots of freedom to try things from everything I've learned in other companies, and just be much quicker to turn ideas through to test products, and then if they work well, launch. So it's a brilliant way for me to sort of do things at pace that in big companies, for lots of right reasons, sometimes take longer than people would like. So yeah.
So how have you found the kind of funding process? Because I know that's something that some of our entrepreneurs aren't really sure about, or they want to go into. How have you found that whole process with starting the business and then having to go through funding?
Yeah, well, it's sort of the reverse of the consulting thing, of where I'm going there and trying to find out, what people's challenges and problems are that I might be able to help solve. This has been the other way around, of me talking to lots of people who've been through that and asked them, how do you do it, frankly? We've not done this before. So we've, read up and looked on Cedars and Crowdcube, and there's loads of testimonials and plenty of people out there that, are willing to help. But talking to founders that have been through the process and have the battle scars has been absolutely invaluable, and people are very generous with their time. I've spoken to probably a dozen founders that have sort of helped us really understand when was the right time, how do they get evaluation, and based on what, and there's loads of different ways to skin a cat. And that's just one aspect of it. And then you think about your pitch decks and your other collateral that you need. It's really, really interesting. And like I say, I wanted to leave corporate life to learn loads of new things, as well as sort of share what I've learned with other companies. So this has been a fantastic learning. I would say, spend time on it. There's probably as much time you need to spend on working out how the funding journey goes as there is for you to work out how you're going to build your brand and your business. It's so important to get it right. And if you really cock it up because you haven't planned it properly, then to try and recover from that, I've heard, is really, really difficult. So it just tells you, that you really need to do your homework, talk to people that have been through it, seek loads of advice. There's lots of stuff out there that's free, but equally there's loads of great organisations that can help you, and they get remunerated in various different ways. But yeah, don't just charge in thinking I just need a sexy PowerPoint deck and people will give me loads of money. That's really not going to work. You need to really manage the whole process and be respectful, because this is people that are thinking about putting their hard-earned money. So you've got to treat it extremely seriously and make sure you've got every step of the process, how you're going to communicate with people, how you're going to respond. All of that needs to be planned out well in advance of going anywhere near, crowdfunding or high net worth individuals. They just won't give you the time. So yeah,
it's interesting actually, because we're kind of told, go crowdfunding and get some crowdfunding and it'll all be great and you'll have loads of money and you can spend it on anything that you want and it'll be fine. But I think actually the process is a lot more involved than that, and we had a little bit of that from Suraj on our previous episode. But from your point of view as well, it sounds like you need to do an awful lot of prep if you're going to consider doing this with your business.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and there's just stuff that unless you know it, you're going to probably make a few errors along the way, like getting, advanced assurance for enterprise investment scheme or seed enterprise investment scheme. That's really important for investors because it's a tax break. So if you didn't know that and didn't sign up before you went to launch, then you're immediately putting yourself at a disadvantage because you can't offer that benefit. So there's some really, sort of fundraising 101 stuff that you should know anyway. You don't really need to pay advice to know that stuff. That's stuff you can find out for free. But yeah, I think, what's really interesting talking to some founders, they've told me things like, I've got one investor who put in £40,000 in the first round. I had one question from him. He put in 40 grand. I hardly ever hear from him. I've done another 2 rounds and he's put in the same or more again. And that's it. That's all he really has in terms of engagement. On the other hand, I've got investors that have put in, 500 quid who are constantly looking for updates and, really, really interested and engaged. But the amount of time I spend on them relative to the importance or the investment scale they put in is disproportionate. So he said they're the sorts of things you need to think. And the more £500 investors you have that, maybe of that ilk, that are just passionate about what you do and really want to understand, you have to just find and invest the time to look after those guys. So it's so much more than just putting your stuff together, doing the raise, signing the documents, because after that they are your they are your investors and they're going to want to know how it's going after they've signed up. So it's, once you're in it for life kind of thing. So that's the other thing is you need to be prepared for that beyond just hopefully being successful in the raise and getting what you need to take the thing on to the next level.
And before we end, I want to try and fit in one more question. As you've been going through this whole journey, have you had any kind of mindset advice that you'd give to our listeners in terms of when you've taken the leap into being a consultant, or you started to go down a new path that you weren't sure about? Is there any kind of mindset stuff that you could kind of pass on to them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, well, every human being has the imposter syndrome. So I would be self-aware enough to know that you're going to quite often find yourself questioning why on earth you are so stupid that you even thought about this. And I think you just got to kind of find a way to deal with that. And I've got this little technique, and I don't know, it's not particularly scientific, but it's almost like, what am I, if when I'm feeling like that, it's kind of like, what am I worried about, and how existential is it? Is it a little bump in the road, or is it something quite serious? And then I ask myself the question, okay, so can I fix it? And if the answer is yes, I can fix it. It's then just a question of when and how, and then I can forget about it. I know that it's a problem, but I've got a plan to fix it. If I can't fix it, it's then, well, I ask myself, who do I know that could give me some help in doing that? And that's great, because you then feel problem shared and all that kind of stuff. So you can then start to feel, even for what looks like big problems, there are people around you, a bit like I've just been talking about on funding. You can find lots of help, and people are willing to help. And before you know it, just by having a few conversations, you start to feel better about the problem. You feel more confident that you can find an answer to that. And generally you can work it through. And when I've gone through that, and in dark moments in the pandemic where you're thinking, when's the next client going to come and all that good stuff, you realize that when you sit down objectively and take the emotion out of it, most problems are not anywhere near as big or as unsolvable as they may look, even at first glance, when they do look terrifying. And you work it through and you think, I'm not going to lose the house, I'm not going to, my wife's not going to leave me. I haven't felt this way, by the way, but do you know what I mean? It's unlikely that things are that bad. So I think that's sort of the mindset I would adopt when you inevitably have those sort of troughs, and you think, this is really tough. Perhaps I should have stayed where I was. On the flip of that, I think just go for it. I read a post from someone who had just done 10 years, and that actually was the thing in my head that said, do it. Because I read this post from her, and she said, when you leave your corporate life and all the trappings of that, you won't have a clue what you're doing, and you'll be thinking, why am I doing this? And am I nuts? And the rest of it. But do it, because you're forever, learning something. You're always going to be moving forward, however small those steps will be. And you'll just have the most amazing conversations and meet the most amazing people. You will find a way for it to work. And there isn't a recipe necessarily for success, but you will find one as you go. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. I've just had the best fun in the last 18 months doing this. Some things have gone unbelievably well, much better than I expected. Other things haven't, but like I say, when they haven't, I've managed it. And I'm not saying this is a rosy future that's unblemished and you'll only have untrammeled success. No, you have to work really bloody hard, but then you have to work really bloody hard in any job for any company these days. So it's just a different kind of hard. But if you want to learn stuff and stretch yourself, then I'd highly recommend it. If anyone wants to talk about my experiences in more depth, if they want to hear me waxing lyrical about this stuff, then all too happy to talk to people.
I think that's a brilliant note to end on. I completely agree. When you start your own company, it's like a baby, and you have to kind of make it work, and the responsibility is on you. But the learning curve is like this, because you're just learning everything about every aspect of the business.
Yeah,
I've got to say, I've really enjoyed it too.
Yeah, definitely. And having a coach on hand is also something I'd recommend, whether that's formal coaching or just finding ways that you can talk to people that, you can have a sensible conversation with. But I think, getting support from a coach is really important, because it just helps you reframe everything and find a way through. So, yeah, I think coaching's fantastic. It's been very, very helpful for me at various points. So I'd also recommend that.
Well, Stuart, since we've come to the end of our time, and it always goes too fast, do you want to tell people where they can find you and your amazing beer?
Well, yes, hopefully all the links are here, but basically People's Captain is the beer company, so you can find us online and on social. So I think all the links are there on that. And then from a consulting point of view, it's GTM Consulting, and you can find me on LinkedIn or via the website direct. So yeah, just drop me a line, give me a call, and be very happy to talk to you about anything in particular that takes your fancy.
And all of this is linked below, so you can just click on it and jump straight through to Stuart's profiles. Stuart, it's been lovely having you as a guest today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it. Thanks very much.